The following video is brought to you in part by the amazing Patreon producers you see before you. If you'd like to show your support, you can do so at patreon.com/616entertainment. Your support means the world to me, and I love you so much. Now let's get to it. The World Wrestling Federation's presence in the early 90s was something to behold, wasn't it? 1990 saw the Ultimate Warrior capture his first and only World Championship. 1991 largely belonged to the immortal Hulk Hogan. And 92 saw the title trade hands between Randy Savage, Ric Flair, and Bret Hart. If there's one area where the WWF enjoyed flexing their muscles, it was in the merchandising department. Wrestling fans were buying up the Coliseum video releases like they were going out of style, and the new Hasbro line of action figures were completely reinventing the world of pro wrestling toys. The constant stream of video games was not letting up. There was truly something for everybody to enjoy. Do you have an NES at home? Cool, you can pick up a copy of WWF WrestleMania. Maybe you were a Game Boy kid. No worries, WWF Superstars has you covered. What if you've got a Game Gear though? Forget about it, WWF WrestleMania Steel Cage Challenge is for you. You see what I mean? We can fault this company for a million reasons, but providing badass merch in practically every area imaginable is not one of them. Today's episode of Triangle X Squared Circle, the wrestling game retrospective series, has us taking a look back at not only the first wrestling game I ever played, but the main inspiration for me becoming a wrestling fan at all.
WWF Royal Rumble from Acclaim!
By the time I'd gotten my hands on the game, it had already been out for years. Released on Super Nintendo in June of 1993 and Sega Genesis in September of 93, you could say I was a little late to the party. But hey man, I didn't know the difference. I was a kid. It was in April of 1996 that my family moved to Alsip, a little suburb just outside of Chicago, and I quickly made friends with Bathroom Money Tim Ewers, a friend of mine to this day. One of the first things we bonded over was, you guessed it, WWF Royal Rumble. At the time, I wasn't a wrestling fan. I had nearly zero exposure to the product, so how could I be? I knew just two things for sure. The first being that somehow I knew who Hulk Hogan was, and secondly, wrestling was fake. I mean, that's what I was told, so that's what I told everybody else. My brother and I were lucky enough to own a Sega Genesis, and we loved it, but Tim had the double deal going on. He was the only kid I knew with a Genesis and a Super Nintendo, which was a huge deal back in the 90s. I have crazy memories of playing Mortal Kombat and Comic Zone on Genesis at his house, along with Donkey Kong Country and Maximum Carnage on the SNES side of things. It's funny, one of the days I remember most vividly across my entire life is the first time I ever played WWF Royal Rumble. I remember the cascading backgrounds on the player select screen. I remember the amazing theme music, as each character had their own track playing behind them. And I remember the first time I ever set my eyes on Bret the Hitman Hart. I don't know what it was about him, but right then and there, I knew two more things for sure. The first being that Bret Hart was the man, and the second being that I was now a wrestling fan. It's the gameplay of Royal Rumble that leads to the best part of this story though, so let me explain how you go about winning your matches. The face buttons, as you might expect, rattle off punches and kicks. Grapple moves are performed from the tie-up, and this is where it gets interesting. Right above the wrestlers' heads appears a meter. Mashing buttons like a complete lunatic will fill this meter, and the side with the superior mashing abilities will execute a maneuver. This is the first game I'd ever played where serious button mashing was required. I'd come from the NES days, playing Castlevania and Batman. I'd never seen anything like this. Even on the Genesis, Maximum Carnage never required me to go nuts on my controller like my life depended on it. My poor little thumbs were ravaged after just an hour of gameplay. I remember a gigantic blister forming on my right thumb, a product of repeated tapping. It was a blister the likes of which I've never had again, even to this day. I'd love to tell you that blister just healed and we went back to gaming an hour later, but that would be a lie. Being a dumbass little kid, not knowing what to do with this bubble on my thumb, I did what anyone would do. I ripped the fucking thing off. I didn't know it was going to expose the red, raw flesh underneath, and it was going to hurt like hell anytime I touched anything for weeks, but that's what we call learning. What I did do later that day was put a band-aid on it, though, and go back to playing anyway, even though it hurt really bad, but what are you going to do? Enough about my childhood stupidity though, let's dig into what Royal Rumble truly has to offer. On the competition side of things, we have several different match types to choose from. Obviously, we've got your normal one-on-one exhibitions, but if you really want to get nasty, you can go for the Brawl option. In this mode, there are no rules, no referee, and no pinfalls. The only way to win is to drain your opponent's health down to 0 by any means necessary. Maybe you're more into multi-man matches though, that's cool. Fire up a tag team match, or even a 6-man tag, which for some reason is called a triple tag team match on the menus. The ultimate challenge is the tournament mode, which throws you up against the entire roster in a gauntlet. Defeating every other superstar on the roster results in either Mean Gene or Howard Finkel presenting our wrestler with the championship belt, before it's revealed that we've also landed the cover of WWF magazine. If tournament mode is the ultimate challenge though, the main event has got to be the Royal Rumble itself. Every single member of the roster hits the ring, up to 6 at a time, and the victor is the final man standing in the center of the ring after all the other competitors have been tossed over the top rope. One of my favorite parts of the game is the stats menu we're presented with after the Rumble has finished. Seeing when each superstar entered, who they eliminated, and who they were tossed out by is a level of detail sculptured software didn't have to include, but they did, and I appreciate it. It's the little details that really stand out to me for this game. I love that we don't just select 2 grapplers and head straight to the ring. We get this awesome newspaper-style hype screen before the action begins. I love that if the referee gets in the way, we don't just clip through him. His ass is going down. My brother and I would actually entertain ourselves by taking turns killing the referee, as silly as that sounds. I love that we can see who I assume are Vince McMahon and Bobby the Brain Heenan calling the action at ringside. We can't hear them, obviously, but the effort was there to include them visually. I mentioned earlier that a victory results in Mean Gene Okerlund raising the winner's hand, but honestly, I'm still not sure if that's Gene or Howard Finkel. They look slightly similar, and in just 16 bits, I honestly don't know who this is. Gene would conduct in-ring interviews, Howard would announce the wrestlers on their way to the ring, but neither of them should be charged with raising the winner's hand. That's the referee's job. But hey, he's gotten his ass kicked tonight, so I understand if he wants no part of this. And it doesn't really matter who it is, as long as he stays out of the way of the steel chairs at ringside. God damn, I love watching that thing bend around somebody's skull. The memories I've shared so far have been largely positive, and it's because I look back on this title with a great deal of nostalgia. When it comes to reality though, not everything is perfect about Royal Rumble, and we need to dig into those things as well. This is not an easy game by any stretch of the imagination. All of my gameplay you've seen thus far is me playing on a difficulty setting of 1 out of 10. Setting the difficulty any higher than 3 is certain death, and that is not an exaggeration. You literally will not win grapple struggles against the AI at level 4 or above, which is a head scratcher. Why even have such a crazy scale if 60% of it is completely useless? I'm not using a turbo controller, which should be noted, but that shouldn't matter. As a developer, you need to put out a game that is playable, and beyond level 3, this one isn't. Let's flip from difficulty to the controls though, shall we? When you're reading the instruction manual,
remember those?
The controls appear simple enough. Using the C button in the grapple will perform a headbutt, B grants you a body slam, and A and B together will perform a finisher if your opponent's health is in the red zone. Here's the issue though. Sometimes the controls just don't work. B and C together should lead to a suplex, but you've got to mash them repeatedly in order to pull the move off. Most of the time you'll end up performing the move either tied to B or C. Pinning a downed opponent is also enacted by tapping B and C together while your opponent is on the canvas. In my entire time recording this gameplay, I was unable to perform a single pinfall attempt. It simply doesn't work. My controller is fine, I can assure you. Finishers are, more often than not, pulled off from the grapple, mashing A and B together and completely filling the meter. The majority of the time though, you'll wind up throwing your opponent over the top rope rather than going for the finisher. You can try it over and over. There's no guarantee you'll get the meter to fill all the way up. It's way more common, in my experience, that the game will perform another move before the meter is full. Why? I have no idea. This is extremely frustrating and can majorly kill the enjoyment of the game. Oh, by the way, the chair you saw earlier, that's the AI hitting me. B and C should pick the chair up, and it simply doesn't work 9 out of 10 times. I don't know what to tell you. I've been covering the Sega Genesis version of the game because that's the one I grew up with. It's the one I know like the back of my hand. I'm much more familiar with it. But it would be a huge blunder to not cover the Super Nintendo version as well, because they are not identical twins. Both versions of the game feature Bret Hart, The Undertaker, Razor Ramon, Shawn Michaels, Randy Savage, Crush, and the Narcissist. But that's where the similarities end. Exclusive to the Super Nintendo edition are Ric Flair, Mr. Perfect, Yokozuna, Ted DiBiase, and Tatanka. The Genesis version has its own exclusives as well, as it features IRS, Jim Duggan, The Model, Papa Shango, and Hulk Hogan. Why the rosters are so different is a mystery to me, as the two versions of the game released just 3 months apart. It's not like the Genesis version hit store shelves a year later and updates needed to be made, so that excuse is out the window. It's very strange. WWF Royal Rumble was a popular title in 1993, no matter which console you happen to own it for. It should be mentioned that Royal Rumble wasn't the first of its kind, as it's a successor to 1992's WWF Super WrestleMania. And Royal Rumble's direct sequel, WWF Raw, was released in 1994, with an updated roster and crazier maneuvers, but those are both another story for another time. Although Royal Rumble doesn't hold up at all in the gameplay department, I'm still able to have fun with it. Is my enjoyment based mostly on nostalgia, on the memories of being 5 years old, spending afternoons at my friend's house, and discovering what pro wrestling truly was? Yes, 100%. Those are memories I'll never forget as long as I live. Those are memories I look back on fondly, but also feel immense pain over, knowing that I can never have those days back. Riding my bike to my friend's house to play Sega Genesis games in 1996 at 5 years old isn't the same as logging onto the PlayStation Network to play games remotely when you're 29 years old. The connection isn't there. The childlike wonder is gone. If there's one thing we can take solace in, though, it's that these games still exist. Holding the cartridge in your hand and popping it into a Sega Genesis doesn't exactly transport us back to the early 90s. But goddammit, it's as close as we can get. And making a video like this is the best I can do to bring us all back to that time. That's it, Dan-Dans. Thank you for tuning in to another installment of Triangle X Squared Circle, the wrestling game retrospective series. WWF Royal Rumble is a game I do look back on fondly, even though it doesn't hold up at all in the gameplay department nowadays. Next time out, we're going to take a look at one of the most highly requested games on this entire channel, WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 2006. I am super excited to dig into that one, and I hope you guys are too. As always, I love you, and I will see you next time.